Welcome everyone to a new season of the Entrepreneur's Chair that I'm thrilled to be hosting here on LinkedIn. Throughout this series, my goal is to provide you with authentic and intimate conversations with trailblazing entrepreneurs that are reshaping the Austin business scene. From startup founders to seasoned business moguls, we'll dive deep into their triumphs, challenges, and pivotal moments that have shaped who they are as an entrepreneur. I am so happy to have with us today Ciji Wagner. She's the founder and CEO of Louder Than Silence, an organization that was birthed from a deep realization that survivors shouldn't have to keep paying for their healing. The idea struck Ciji when she was driving home from an EMDR therapy session, and questions were swirling through her brain. Why am I having to pay for this? Haven't I already paid enough? And haven't all survivors paid enough? From that moment, Louder Than Silence, it was set in motion, built on the belief that healing should be accessible, not another burden. Ciji was raised in rural Pennsylvania, and she pursued her culinary passion at the Culinary Institute of America before embarking on a dynamic career in the food industry, where she served as an executive chef for a nonprofit. Her entrepreneurial spirit took her to Austin, where she launched a company focused on reducing food waste. But it was there that she really discovered her true calling, which is creating meaningful change through Louder Than Silence. Today, she channels her passion into building a supportive space for survivors, ensuring they have the resources and the community that they need to heal. Welcome, Ciji.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I am so honored to have you here today and excited about our conversation, so thank you.
Yes, I am also very excited to be here, and this feels like a very serendipitous moment. So I can't wait for this conversation.
Awesome. So Louder Than Silence, you started this based on a personal revelation kind of through your own experiences, the treatment. And could you take us back to 2018 when, you were going through this process and then you just kind of said, I'm going to do this?
Sure, yes. As you mentioned, I was still working in the food industry at the time, and that was my expectation, to stay in the food industry. And having moved to Austin because of the great support for, small startup food businesses. And I had also decided when I moved to Austin, that's when I was going to start EMDR. I knew I was making this big life change. I was going to be transitioning to Austin. And so after a few months of being here, being in EMDR, I kind of just kept getting this sense of wow, I can't believe how much my life has changed. And then there's this one specific EMDR session that I had in September of 2018, where I was driving home from the session and just feeling the weight lifted and just kind of reveling in this wow, my life has changed beyond belief. I could not fathom how much different my life was. And then I had that moment that you mentioned, but why am I paying for this?
Right.
I was giving my time, my energy, my emotional space, all of it to this process of healing. But why was I also financially paying for this? And I was thinking through kind of the roster of other survivors of sexual violence that I knew who had heard kind of my success story. And they were yeah, I would love to do that, but I can't afford it. And I'm well, I can't afford it either. So how do we do this? How do we get money to other survivors? And I remember the exact intersection that I was at where I was just yeah, I'm going to figure it out. I don't know what it means. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know where I'm going to go from here, but I was just committed to, even if it's just one other person who has access to this, that's enough, and I will figure that out. And so here we are all these years later and a whole nonprofit later, and it's exciting to see kind of how that's unfolded.
It's interesting because most people don't think about nonprofit being entrepreneurial.
Right.
But at its root, especially when you're talking about this kind of endeavor, man, you have to have some real strength to make it happen.
That is true. Yes. I often use the word tenacity to describe what it's like to get something like this going.
Well, I'm very glad that you did.
Thank you.
So survivors of sexual violence often face barriers to accessing trauma treatment. So where does Louder Than Silence step in to fill that gap?
Yeah, what a great question. So, of course, we need crisis intervention in these spaces, and that's where we see a lot of resources currently. And what I realized from my own experience, and again with other survivors that I knew, is that for a lot of us, we were talking about childhood experiences or something that happened 2, 3, 4 decades ago. We're past the statute of limitations, so we can't report. So we're kind of left in this no woman's land of, all right, what now? Like, I see this trauma that's been lurking beneath the surface. How do I address it? Where do I go? What do I do with this? How do I even take these steps? And so that's where we really want to step in and say, we're here for this, whatever it looks like. So we really step alongside of people when they have reached this point of, oh, I didn't realize how much this was affecting me. And it might have been 2 years ago, and it might have been literally 30 years ago. And wherever people are at with that, we walk with them from that point forward as long as they want to participate with us.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know we've had conversations where there's a lot of the victim services that are available to people that go through the official reporting process. But as we know, so many women especially don't report. So how do you ensure that these women are able to get the treatment that they deserve?
Yeah. So we started our flagship program with EMDR, right? Because we realized that a trauma-specific set of interventions was what was really needed here, because we're talking about undoing the effects of trauma.
Right.
And so we started with this concept and then realized the other core component of that is community.
Oh, yeah.
If we don't have people who understand us, understand what we've been through, understand where we're at, like studies after studies have shown that the PTSD just continues because we want somebody to hear us. And then when we don't feel like we receive that, it just like perpetuates that trauma. So what we realized was we really needed this community of people who just simply get it, where you can like kind of stumble through something and be like, I don't know, that didn't make sense at all, did it? And everybody's like, yes, I 100% understand exactly what you were saying. And so this is what we're trying to build, kind of this set of resources, the professional mental health care, and the community. So people feel like there's a wide variety of ways for them to kind of interact with whatever phase they're at in this healing process.
Wow. And I'm sure confidentiality and safety and people just...
all of those things
are able to become wrapped in a warm blanket, so to speak.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about the, EMDR is the centerpiece of the treatment, but I'm not sure that many people that might be watching understand what it is, why it works. I'm not sure everybody understands exactly why it works, but would you mind to what is EMDR? Why do you think it helped you? And
Yeah. So EMDR stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing, which explains nothing about what it actually does. So I always start with that because people are like, oh, what does that actually stand for? And then I explain it and they're like, okay, I have no more information to work off of. So what EMDR does is it kind of works off of this premise that when we experience anything traumatic, whether it's a big T trauma, right, which is kind of the big catastrophic events, or a series of little T traumas, right? We all have kind of day-to-day things that harm us. So when these moments happen, the cognitive processing part of the brain just goes offline, right? We go into lizard brain, fight or flight, survival mode, kind of however you want to describe that. And it keeps us alive, which is fantastic. Like, what a great mechanism that exists. But also that mechanism doesn't allow for the part of the brain that stores memories to store the memory. So then the brain is saying, oh, that's happening right now today, even if it was 30 years ago. And so that's how we end up with the nightmares and the flashbacks and the reactivity, is because the brain is saying, oh no, that's right now today. Like, we have to figure out how to survive this moment, even though we're not currently in crisis. And so with EMDR, what it does is it allows the brain to just recognize that, oh, that was actually however long ago it was. That was 15 years ago. We can just store that as a thing that was 15 years ago. So it just removes that blockage. And it sounds overly simplifying to say it that way, but like, that's truly what it's doing, is just allowing the brain to do what it needs to do. And that just kind of calms the nervous system. It calms all of these trauma responses connected to that process. And for me, as I mentioned,
Sure.
it changed my life to the point that I was like, I'm going to start a nonprofit so that other people have access to this. But I was unaware of just how much weight I was carrying until I could go to a session and just feel that weight drop off and be like, oh, that's what I was carrying this whole time, and nobody told me. And so it was just it felt like a miracle. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, but it was just time after time, facing the most deep pain and wounds and coming out the other side saying, but I'm not carrying it anymore. And getting to the end of that protocol and seeing that process was just life-giving in a way of nothing else I've ever received in my life.
Wow. And knowing that that's possible for others, that, and that's that a little bit of frustration, which is, how do we get it to everyone that needs it?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about your services and programs, but I'd like to delve a little bit more into that. And also, you have this business background, and so I know that your organization is metric and outcome oriented. When I was in nonprofit, I always talked about running it more like a business with the heart of a nonprofit, and I know we've talked a little bit about that. But can you talk a little bit to that topic?
Sure, yes. So our entry point into all of our programs is a 12-week-long workshop that we do as a cohort. So it is one group of survivors working through our curriculum that we've designed together. And really it's designed to build that, like, okay, I have this core community now that I can count on. I've gotten to really know these folks. And then from there, if you're taking the step into EMDR, then you have this group of people where you're just like, it feels like too much today. And then you can have these people be like, yeah, but you're doing it and it's great. And like, look at you go. And just having that connection makes a huge difference in the success of EMDR itself. But then we also do a whole cadre of follow-up support. So one of my favorites is retreats. So we have weekend-long retreats where folks from this area and other states come in, and we really nourish ourselves, right? Nourish with each other's company, with good food, with self-care activities, and it's just this beautiful time together. And we also have reunion meetings. So for the folks who have gone through the workshops, then those folks meet, but then we introduce other cohorts together, so then they can be like, oh, I've met you at this thing this one time, so now I can show up in this other space because I know I have a buddy already because we've met. And so we keep building out that network so all the different cohorts can get to know each other. So then we can do book clubs, and we can do writing clubs, and we can do self-care events. And we have people that just keep building all these connection points to each other. And then we keep building out our self-care kits, our other resources, so that people just have access to oh, it turns out that journaling is really good for me, but I didn't know until somebody literally handed me a journal and was like, hey, maybe this is a good thing for you.
Having the support along the way must be so transformational.
It really is, yes. And to your point about metrics, I want to make sure I touch on that. Is we have people self-report, self-assess where they were at before they started, and then where they're at after EMDR, after doing these workshops. And we cover kind of a wide array of things. So it's everything from anxiety levels to health of relationships to being able to express emotions. So we have people just kind of getting a sense of, yes, I was at a 6 out of 10 before, and now I'm at a 9 out of 10 now. So it's them reporting where they are at with this. And we're currently in the process of building out kind of a long-term way of measuring these metrics, because now that we are, officially in year 6, we can say, all right, we have folks who have been with us for 5 years. So what does that success look like? You know, we're talking about improved financial outcomes. People have gone back to school and gotten master's degrees. Like all of these, you know, additional pieces of the puzzle are coming together. And so it's like, okay, we're working on how do we measure these additional benefits that can't be covered in the immediate short term, like, oh, I have this immediate PTSD response no longer, you know, trailing me around in life.
Right.
But what does that look like in year 5, in year 10, in year 15? And so those are the things we're really excited about seeing what that looks like.
That is, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see.
Yeah, I know. I can't wait.
And I love that your brain and your organization thinks that way.
Yes.
Because I think
Yes.
that's what we all want is, you know, we just want to make sure that the programs we're investing in are providing an investment. And I think when you look at what freeing someone of some of these things and then being able to become more of a whole person, it's quite impressive. Now, I want to ask a question this one is just, it's beyond me, that there's, my understanding, thousands, if I don't even know what the number is, but rape kits that have not been tested. And I have no idea what a survivor of some kind of trauma, knowing that there's this evidence that someone's not willing to fund. How does that happen?
Oh, I mean, how much time do we have today? I recently looked up, or attempted to look up even, the stats,
Yeah.
right? How many are left? How many have we processed, we collectively, right, as a society? And we don't even know the number. Like we can't even access because the data is not readily available. And so like that alone, I was just like, okay. I'm already frustrated and it's just trying to find a number. And the estimation currently is around 50,000 are still untested. Since 2015, that's when the DOJ officially started like giving out these grants to process rape kits. We have, as they say, but it's hard to track, processed about 150,000. And so that has led to around 11,000 convictions of either violent criminals, generally speaking, or sexual violence predators. And that is a huge number of people who were just like out in society who are now receiving the outcome of their decisions. And then thinking about the 50,000, I think it's sometimes easy to be like 50,000. Okay, well, there's like millions of people. Like, is that really that many? Or, you know,
Yeah.
But I was thinking about this really deeply yesterday, and I don't personally have an untested rape kit, but I can put myself in the shoes of somebody who went through the traumatic experience and then went through the traumatic experience of doing the rape kit. Like it is a 4 to 10 hour long process.
Right.
Like it is the most invasive evidence gathering system that exists. So they went through that in hopes that the person who attacked them would receive some sort of justice. And to know that despite all of that evidence that has literal genetic ties to the person is just sitting somewhere. I mean, that, like, it almost brought me to tears. Sure. To like think about like just how heartbreaking and devastating it is to think about why it would feel like you don't matter.
Right.
Right? Like if you say this horrible thing happened and I'm willing to put myself through what it takes to put the evidence out there and then just have it sit on a shelf. I mean, that's sending a very strong message.
Well, and I think a lot of rapists, it's serial.
It is.
It's
yes.
not just one person.
It's
and
not.
So, yeah, I don't comprehend it. It's just mind-boggling. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But thank you for sharing a little bit there. You know, you moved back to Austin. You were going to do work in a for-profit, and you've done work as a business consultant. How do you think your background in entrepreneurship and different approaches with business shaped how you lead Louder Than Silence?
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about because, as you mentioned, this importance of running a nonprofit like a business, that I find I am more comfortable often in entrepreneurial spaces or like business leader spaces than nonprofit spaces because I was in that world for so long. Like that kind of intuitively makes sense to me, whereas with nonprofits, I'm still like trying to figure out
Sure.
like where I sort of like fit in with the whole thing. But going from this perspective of in the restaurant world, you're constantly looking at expenses. You're looking at P&Ls every single week, right? It's very much just like part of the fabric of what you're doing to know every single cost. You're tracking every single thing. You know the cost of the burger and the fries and the ketchup and what if they ask for an extra patty on, all of those things because you have to. Mm-hmm. And so I found that translated really easily into the as we're scaling up this nonprofit, we need to know exactly what everything costs. And when you're starting from scratch, it's a big question mark all the time. You're like, I think it's this, but having the perspective of I need to keep track of all of this so that we have a system, we have a structure. And yes, it's a question mark now, but it won't be because from day one, we're saying this needs to be tracked.
Right.
And how do we keep the heart in all of it? Right? Because the heart of it is the thing that matters. We're doing this because of wanting to help people get out of the darkness that they're in. And it's a very interesting balance to all right, I can't be too much heart and I can't be too much mind. So how do I hold the heart space and hold the mind space at the same time? And I am particularly glad that I have that business background and that mindset because I think it would be really easy to just sit in the space of I'm in the heart space and kind of leave some of the details to fall off to the side.
Well, it's funny because we met in a venture capital event, which is kind of funny looking back on it, that was a space that brought us together.
Yes. I often think about that because, and it was a tech venture capital thing. And so somebody convinced me to go and they're like, you never know who you're going to meet. And I was just like, this is not the space. What are we doing here? And as it turns out, I have learned from that one experience that there's always at least one person that I can make a connection with at whatever the event is. Because there's always going to be at least one other person there that's yeah, I feel what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. I don't just hear it. I don't just understand it. I feel what you're talking about. And that really helped kind of open a lot of other doors that I wasn't expecting. And so
love that. So when you think about, you are doing you and your organization are doing such amazing work, fundraising for such, there's just complications, in raising money in this fund, having the conversations. Can you talk a little bit about how you raise money when this is such a hard conversation to have with so many people?
It is a very hard conversation to have. And I'm very sensitive to, I don't want to catch people off guard, right? I'm walking into a space and if people aren't anticipating that they're going to be confronted by this notion, that can be, it can be triggering, it can be off-putting, it can be frustrating, you name it, right? And so I have the opportunity to learn how to hold space for whatever the reaction is that I'm getting and really having to create the additional space for let's have an intentional conversation about this thing. It's not feeding puppies and kittens, right? It's not warm and fuzzy. It's not people are automatically oh yeah, of course we need that. It is sitting in the space and saying, we know we need this. Can you make the emotional space for recognizing that we need this? And part of that is societally, it's really difficult to look in the face this concept of so many people are just hurting behind the scenes without really talking about it publicly. And that's not something we really want to address. And so I'm sort of pushing against that societal norm of yeah, but it's a real thing. It's here, whether or not we want to talk about it. and also allowing for people to have whatever responses that they're going to have. And the additional piece of it with the work we do is that it's long-term care, right? It's not as statistic friendly as being able to say, oh, this person was in a domestic violence situation and now they are living in a safe place, which is great and needed and wonderful. And of course, like, yes, all the time do that.
Yeah.
But we are in the like, all right, so from there, does that person need 5 years, 10 years, 20 years of intervention to like really reclaim herself again? And we also don't want to face that. We don't want to face that it truly takes, like for me, myself, I am at a decade into my healing process. And there are still things that bubble up where I am still working through trauma responses. And, they're obviously much smaller now and I can manage them, but it takes so much intervention. And I think that is also challenging to talk about because there's not a clear marker of, we did it. Congratulations, check the box. We can move on now. We're saying we're going to show up and we're going to keep showing up. And that's much less tangible. And so it's hard to wrap your brain around the like, okay, yeah, we know we need this, but what does that look like really? And how long? And it's like, yeah, great questions.
Well, and I think it's wonderful because you've done the, the financial of what the cost for helping with the EMDR treatment, and then the workshops, and then the community to wrap around to support the person long term. So, everything I've seen with your organization, it's economically efficient in a very complex issue.
And we're trying to be, certainly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, with all the wonderful people that are hearing you today, how do we come alongside of you? How do we support louder than silence in the best way possible?
Yeah. We would love for people to join our Survivor Support Network. It is our network of folks who do monthly donations to support our work. And it's a community of people who are just like, yep, we're in it too. And so we really want folks who are just like, yes, we believe in this, to join that community of folks and say, we're all in, we're doing it.
Well, and I'm assuming those people then need to bring in their friends as well.
Oh, yes, yes.
We need to make your life easier. I know
please,
you do,
please do.
So much work, and we're so appreciative of what you're bringing to the world. That's important. So I like to end each conversation with a couple of questions, and this is kind of fun because I don't interview or haven't as many nonprofit leaders. So talking about what you think authentically makes for a successful entrepreneur.
Oh, I love that question. Again, nonprofit lens, if I put my for-profit hat on, it might be a little bit different. But from the nonprofit lens, I would say what a successful entrepreneur is somebody who can bring their idea to life and make that flourish, and also bring themselves to life and have themselves flourish. I think it's so easy to abandon ourselves when we're pursuing something big. Right. We kind of push our own needs to the side and we say, oh, well, that's not important right now because I'm doing this thing. And I think for me, it's really been, okay, how do I say I am improving? I am getting better. I can take up more space. I am out in the world more, as at the same time that louder than silence is. Because we all need to flourish, and that includes me. Right? Not just the organization. And so to me, that's what success looks like, is being able to say, I am better off for everything that I have done in doing this work. Yeah,
there's so much bravery involved in what you do. So thank you for doing it.
Thank you.
And then last but not least, how do you define success as an entrepreneur?
To me, success as an entrepreneur is being able to fully show up for myself and fully show up for the organization, and allowing the space for whoever I'm with to be fully themselves too. That is success to me.
I love that. What you do just fills my heart, and please keep doing what you're doing, and let's amplify, and let's help as many people as we possibly can. So
let's do it.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.